Okay, thank you very much for inviting me to this seminar. As was just announced, my name is Andrew Collins. My background is actually as a journalist and writer in the field of ancient history, which I've been doing for the last 20 to 25 years. And I have a number of books on this topic, but my speciality over the past 10 years has been Gobekli Tepe in eastern Anatolia. And what I want to try and do is to see what we have discovered at Gobekli Tepe and try to marry that with the work that has been going on at Gunung Padang recently. So without further ado, I shall start with Gunung Padang itself. And by the way, I want to apologise in advance if I mispronounce any of the Javanese words that I shall be using. Any more difficult ones, I will actually probably leave to you. And if you wish to say them out aloud, then do. But obviously, this is where we are now. It's my first time in Java. I look forward to seeing Gunung Padang tomorrow for the first time with Danny Hillman. And obviously, as far as conventional archaeology is concerned, they suggest that this incredible megalithic structure, on a hillside, a series of terraces, 5 terraces of what they call megalithic architecture or stone settings, dates to the late Neolithic period or the so-called Metal Age. And this would give it a date of around 2500 to 1500 BC. And yet, as we know from the incredible work that Danny Hillman has been doing with his team at the site since 2011, that there would almost certainly appear to be underlying megalithic structures at the site that go down for a depth of many metres, and that the soil that has been removed from around these large stone blocks, which obviously Danny will talk about himself, are suggesting incredible ages which take us back possibly as far as 24 or 25,000 years ago, but certainly strong evidence to suggest that there was a monument on the site as early as 10 to 12,000 years ago. Now, if this is the case, then we have to try and understand why this monument is here and who might have constructed it. And from my point of view, I wanted to come in here with my own expertise from Gobekli Tepe and see if we can look in similar areas with similar understandings. Obviously, these are the geometric works, readings that have been done, which shows that there are deeper levels and possibly chambers or possibly a lava tube or some kind of underground structure which could well be of artificial origin deep beneath Gunung Padang, and work obviously continues there to this day to try and understand these monuments and to uncover them for the first time. And obviously this is one of the conceived images of how this may have looked perhaps 10,000, 12,000 years ago. So with this, I think we need to switch back to Anatolia and seeing if we can create a bridge between Java and Anatolia, which is obviously the modern Republic of Turkey. And we come here to this place called Gobekli Tepe. It's about 13 kilometres away from the very ancient city of Şanlıurfa, which, as was mentioned earlier on, is the birthplace of Abraham, almost certainly. It's also on the edge of the traditional site of the Garden of Eden in the Bible and the Quran, and that it's in this very area that it is said that the 4 rivers of paradise actually take their course and flow to the different parts of the world. And 2 of those rivers are the Euphrates and the Tigris. So we're in an area which is considered to be the cradle of civilization anyway. It's also the place of the birth in the Western world of the Neolithic revolution. So this is the great changeover from the state of hunter-gatherers to that of agriculture. And this took place probably within sight of Gobekli Tepe around 9000 BC. So what is Gobekli Tepe itself? Well, it's a series of standing stones or stone circles which have been uncovered underneath a occupational mound on the top of a mountain. And these stones are positioned around the edge of walls, pointing towards two huge, great central monoliths. Monoliths which are up to 5.5 metres in height and maybe 15 to 20 tonnes apiece. And that there are 5 main structures been uncovered so far, and these are around 15 to 20 metres across. Here is one of them. This is what's called Enclosure C. It's the largest of all of the monuments. This is the very central circle within it. You can see that the inner ring of stones here. There's an outer ring here, and this is one. These are the 2 central pillars which have been partly destroyed in antiquity. In this one, and this has an entranceway that comes in from the south. And this is what it would have looked like probably around 9000 BC when it was constructed. You can see these huge great monuments in the middle. Here's another structure here known as Enclosure D, which I'll show you in a second. Here's the entranceway. And on all of these stones, which have T-shaped tops to them, there are incredible carvings of animals. Here's one of them here. There's a fox. But what's also important is that these stones are not simply roof supports. They are actual freestanding statues of the human form. Here, as I say, this one here is about 5.5 metres tall. Here is the bent arms reaching round to fingers in the front. This is another example. You can see that the hands here. You can see some kind of garment worn here with this vertical drop, and some kind of pendant being worn on a chain or a thong or something around the neck. And this represents the head. It's an abstract form. This is the way that they wanted to represent it. They knew how to do the human head, so they wanted to show these stones in some kind of abstract form. This is one of the most incredible of the standing stones. This is in Enclosure C, and you can see this incredible 3D animal, some kind of quadruped, perhaps a lion, it's suggested, or a panther, that's actually carved out of the stone, and you know, this would have taken an incredible amount of organising to try and create this from the point of the quarry to the finished carving and stone in place, as you see here. And there are many, many examples of this. Here's something, you know, quite bizarre that was found. It's a stone totem pole. It was found at Gobekli Tepe. It's now in the museum at Şanlıurfa, and it shows these snakes here curling round. It shows this child coming out from the area of the womb, which is there. This is the child there with some kind of bowl or something. And all of these other carvings are also found at Gobekli Tepe, and there are literally hundreds of them. Now this is the actual occupational mound from the air. It's about 300 by 200 metres across, and here's all the various enclosures. They're in the south. They're the ones that I've shown you so far, but the new excavations are taking place now in the northwest corner of it. At this very moment, this is the work that's actually going on to uncover new standing stones there. This is what's known as Enclosure H. And this is an overhead of Enclosure H. You can see these stones being revealed. Now, these are probably about 5 metres below the surface, but the depth of the occupational mound goes down to around 15 metres. And I want to point out that this mound is made from earth that had to be imported from the valleys below and moved to this site. And what it would seem to have happened is that all these various stone enclosures were probably not all built at the same time. They were built one after the other and used for a period of time, perhaps 100 years or so, and then they would be covered up and decommissioned, and other ones would either be built by their side or above them. And in this way, they created this mound, this occupation mound of different levels, with the oldest structures dating to around 9,500 BC, actually on the bedrock itself, some of them even carved out of the bedrock, and the youngest ones around 8,000 BC at the very edge on the top of the occupational mound. And at the end of Gobekli Tepe's useful life, which was about 8,000 BC, the remaining enclosures were covered over and the whole thing abandoned. This is one of the stones they've recently uncovered in enclosure H that's absolutely covered with different types of creatures of the natural world. You've got birds, you've got snakes, this is probably a vulture, you have lions and things like this. I mean, the amount of work involved in this is extraordinary. And you get this on all of the stones, these beautiful carvings. Now, we need to try and understand what was going on in the world at this time. And Gobekli Tepe's earliest structures, as I say, date to around 9,500 BC. This is at the end of a 1,300-year cold spell or mini ice age known as the Younger Dryas. And it would seem as if this was the point of change, not only in the climate, but in migrations of people, of animals, probably even helped the birth of agriculture. And this is when Gobekli Tepe was constructed. Clearly there was more things going on at this time, which we'll come on to, to actually say why it might have been created. But Gobekli Tepe is down here. This is modern-day Turkey or Anatolia. Here's the Black Sea, the Caspian Sea, the Caucasus Mountains here, Georgia. Well, the Younger Dryas affected the upper part of the northern hemisphere. And almost certainly the peoples that were responsible for the construction work at Gobekli Tepe were probably locals. In archaeological terms, they were probably the last remnants of the so-called Natufian peoples. But what seems to have happened is that peoples were also migrating in from the area of what is today Russia and the Ukraine, up here, into Anatolia via the Caucasus area, being pushed south by the obviously extreme weather at the time of the Younger Dryas mini ice age. And they almost certainly formed power elites that were controlling communities. And the best candidates for these almost certainly are people known as the Swiderians. They emerged from an East European population known as the Gravatians, who thrived between 40 and 17,000 years ago. And these were a people of incredible high culture, as you will see. Their main sites were in central Russia, a place called Sungar and Kostenki, which was established by at least 30 to 40,000 years ago. They were also in the country that we now know as Czechoslovakia, but the main important ones here were definitely in Russia. And they achieved the type of high culture that we would associate probably with the medieval age as early as 30,000 years ago. They had tailored clothing, they had jewellery, incredible thousands of beads were sewn into their garments. They created structures of wood and ivory. And I would think that if we saw these people today, they would not look that much out of place anywhere within this world today. These are reconstructed by an artist by the name of Libor Bullock. and here's another image that he's created. And these people were experimenting with agriculture, we know 30,000 years ago at Kostenki in Russia. Plus, I found evidence of the earliest astronomical observatories at Kostenki, dating to at least 30,000 years ago. Monuments that seem to be aligned to the extreme northern cycle of the moon during its 18.6 year lunar standstill cycle. So these people were observing the skies at this period. And remember, this is 30 to 40,000 years ago. This is plenty of time for development before we come down to Gobekli Tepe. Also at Kostenki was an extensive cult of the goddess and the production of these beautiful Venus statues, which I think probably reflects their interest in the moon. And the moon's potency to do with the female cycle, the menses, creation and life itself. I think all these were ideas that were being experimented with at this time. Now, going back to Anatolia, there are at least 4 other sites that are part of the same culture as Gobekli Tepe. And here's one of them, a place called Karahan Tepe. It's about 30 miles to the east of Gobekli Tepe. And this is the test pits have been done, but no proper excavations here. But you find this incredible evidence of high technology. I mean, this is the corner of a window frame or door entrance you can find here. There are various examples of them just lying around on the ground, and these are over 10,000 years old. More stones. This one has got a serpent on the side, and you can see here, this is a stone row. And you can see that the stones are only just peeking out at the surface. In the coming years, there will be excavation work done here, and we'll better understand what is discovered. But it could be a site as large as Gobekli Tepe itself. Okay, and various other sites around the world are opening up to show that there was high culture as early as 10 to 11,000 years ago. Even in my own country of England, Stonehenge, one of the most famous megalithic monuments in the world, there's now evidence to show that there was a monument on the site here involving huge, massive tree-like posts, 15 to 20 metres tall, as early as 8,000 BC, and that there was activity going on here, a proto-Stonehenge, which obviously brings us down to the fact of what was going on during this period. What was it that inspired the supersizing of the religious cult shrine, you know, from small wooden structures or maybe cave structures into these incredible megalithic monuments? Well, one of the keys is the Cataclysm, which we now know took place and devastated large parts of the world with wildfires, tsunamis, ash clouds which blotted out the sky for maybe years and probably even triggered the Younger Dryas mini ice age, which took place between 10,900, which is when it began, with repercussions for several hundred years later until about 10,340 BC. This absolutely devastated the world. It almost certainly destroyed many of the so-called Pleistocene megafauna, you know, the mammoth, the giant sloth, the giant camel, possibly even things like the saber-toothed tiger. All of these animals disappeared at this time, never really to be seen again. And it was almost certainly caused by an inbound comet that probably fragmented on its way around the sun and peppered the earth with literally thousands of fragments. Now, it was mostly the Americas that were struck, but there is evidence of an ash layer being found all the way around the world, from Egypt to Russia to Britain to America, and even in Australia, this ash layer, all dating to around 10,900 BC, has been found. And I believe that Gobekli Tepe was constructed as a response to this cataclysm. The fear of further cataclysm caused people to change their entire outlook on life. And we can see some evidence of this from one of the main stones at Gobekli Tepe in Enclosure D. You have this very strange belt buckle. around the mid-waist area. Now, this is the belt. This has various symbols on it, H symbols here and others. And you have this fox pelt loincloth below it. But this symbol here, look at this U shape with the circle, with the 3 lines like that. Now, I don't know about you, but what that reminds me of is a comet, with the U being the bow shot that goes in the front of the head of the comet, and the 3 prongs being probably the 3 tails of a comet, and obviously the centre being the actual ball itself. Now here it is again, you can see it there. But what's interesting, and perhaps confirmation of this, is that this figure wears a fox pelt loincloth, and on the side of the stone is a fox. And the fox is a universal symbol around the world of comets, the appearance of comets in the sky, and they are harbingers of destruction, and very often around the world, shamans would adorn themselves in fox pelt loincloths like this to combat the supernatural forces that they saw as associated with comets and the destruction which they would inevitably bring. And I believe that this is a memory of this destruction that took place at the very end of the last ice age during this so-called Younger Dryas impact event. And evidence of this connection between canines and comets and destruction can be found in the Norse myth, that the myths of the peoples from Scandinavia, of the age of Ragnarok, the doom of the gods, a cataclysm that took place in the past that was brought on by this wolf and its offspring, other wolves. And this wolf was known as the Fenris wolf, or the Fenrir wolf. And it rains down fire and nearly destroys the gods. It almost destroys the human race as well that exists on Earth. And as early as 1884, an American writer named Ignatius Donnelly actually suggested that the Fenris wolf was a memory of a comet that nearly destroyed the world at the end of the last ice age. And I believe that he's absolutely right, and that the symbol of the comet is remembered in many myths and legends as a canine, a wolf, a fox, or obviously a dog in general. In Chinese mythology, for instance, there is a lot to do with dogs representing comets and other phenomena in the sky. And around the world, it was the job of the shaman, the person who walked between this world and the next, to combat the supernatural forces, or the so-called cosmic trickster, that was seen to bring destruction to the world. And this destruction was seen to be connected with the idea of a pole that linked the earth to heaven, a cosmic axis. And it was believed that the trickster could come in and knock that pole over and bring about eternal darkness and absolute destruction in the world. And in various cultures, for instance, in Scandinavia and Finland, amongst the Sami shamans, it is still their duty to conduct their ceremonies to ensure that the destruction of the world does not take place. And I believe very strongly that one of the reasons why Gobekli Tepe was constructed, and why religious shrines were supersized in this way around the end of the last ice age, was to create an easy access between what was perceived as this world, the mundane world, and the world of spirit, the world of the supernatural, which was the other world. Call it the sky world, call it the underworld if you want, but it's the world that exists within dreams, within altered states of consciousness, which the shaman would have to reach, would have to achieve in order to deal with these supernatural forces. And it is my belief also that there's a connection here with Gunung Padang, which we will go on to shortly. Now, before we carry on there, where was this other world? Did they believe that it was a place that was located somewhere specific. Well, there is evidence of this at Gobekli Tepe. Here are 4 of the enclosures, and 2 of the enclosures point between their 2 central pillars to a holed stone, a standing stone with a hole in it. Let me show you this. Okay. 2 of them have exact holes like this at exactly the same place. Here it is. See this? Between the 2 stones. So in other words, somebody standing between these monoliths in 9000 or 9500 BC would be able to stare through that hole at something on the local horizon. And that local horizon, the direction of that, was in the northwest. So what would they have seen at this time? Well, at night, they would have looked, there we go, they would have looked directly at the Milky Way, and in particular the setting of a bright star in the constellation of Cygnus, the celestial bird or celestial swan, called Deneb. Okay? Now, Deneb also marks the point of opening of what's known as the Great Rift or Dark Rift in the Milky Way. You can see this here. And universally around the world, the Milky Way, particularly in the Northern Hemisphere, has been seen as a point of entrance and exit into the sky world for shamans and for particularly the souls of the shamans to enter and exit, but also the place where our own souls originate and return to in death. Now, here is the northern part of the Milky Way, and overlaid on it is an Egyptian goddess named Nuit, and she was personified in the sky as the Milky Way, and the area of her womb was the place of entrance and exit to the sky world. This is why the pharaohs believed that they came from and returned to the womb of this goddess Nuit. And this is why you also find the stars of Cygnus reflected very strongly in the positions of pyramids and the orientations of various temples, because the pharaohs believed that they wanted to go back to this womb, this cosmic womb in the sky. And its similar ideas are found all over the world, from Mexico to India, to the American continent with the mound building cultures there. But what relevance has this to Gunung Padang? Well, myself and my colleague, the engineer Rodney Hale, thought that obviously we could try and bring our own expertise to what is going on at Gunung Padang and see if we can make some suggestions. Well, the first thing that we confirmed with Danny Hillman was the orientation of Gunung Padang. And certainly it seems to be at 342 degrees. Now that's towards the north-northwest. That's exactly the same direction as Gobekli Tepe. Okay? So the first thing that you realise relating to this orientation is that it hits the right-hand peak of the stratocruiser, the Pangrango Gedi stratovolcano. And this seems to be quite deliberate, and that there is some relationship between the construction of the monument and the positioning of the volcano, which would obviously have been very prominent in the local landscape. And I believe that one of the reasons for this is that the peoples who occupy Gunung Padang believed that they too had to counter the supernatural forces that brought about cataclysm and devastation in the world, which they saw reflected through the proximity of volcanoes like this and the eruptions, and that the presence of shamans would probably have been to try and stop the eruptions of the volcanoes, and that various ceremonies would have to be done. And I don't think that we have to look at any particular period of time. I think this would have been going on throughout the entire existence of Gunung Padang as a monument, possibly to 10 to 12,000 years ago, arguably even around an original cave shrine as early as 25,000 years ago. We certainly know that there were modern humans on Java, particularly in East Central and Eastern Java, as early as 25 to 30,000 years ago. And that they probably also experienced the cataclysm, the Younger Dryas cataclysm, which would have affected this part of the world. There's no question about that itself. Part of the ash layer from this event has been found at Australia. I'm sure it will also be found in Java as well. So they probably saw the stratovolcano as personified as some kind of fire god. There are many stories of fire gods connected with volcanoes in Indonesia. And I've written about this in an article already about Gunung Padang. But is there some deeper meaning towards this particular orientation, like at Gobekli Tepe? Well, my colleague Rodney Howe looked at the different alignments, astronomical alignments, or possible astronomical alignments within the dates, and this would clearly be seen as a setting of one or more stars into the peak of the volcano as seen from the perspective of Gunung Padang. And obviously there are various options here, and until we have a better understanding of the building phases, it's very difficult to say which one might be meaningful. But we have stars of Cassiopeia, Polaris, Cygnus even, just like at Gobekli Tepe, but that's obviously around 12,500 BC. And then much later, you have orientations towards stars in Ursa Major, Ursa Minor, and from 2,800 to 2,700 BC of Dubi, the brightest star of Ursa Major, the Big Dipper. And I understand that in Indonesian folklore that the Big Dipper is seen as a boat, a celestial boat, a boat of the gods. Now that could be quite relevant to any building phases of activity at Gunung Padang around this time, but this may well be the last phase of activity, certainly as far as the radiocarbon dating is concerned. But the one I want you to focus on just for a second is the interest of around 14,900 BC and then again around 8,750 BC of the setting into Gede of the star Vega in Lyra. I think this is possibly very important. And when I say these dates extend for many hundreds of years. So for that period of time, if you were on Gunung Padang and you were looking towards the Gede peak, the star Vega would have set perfectly down into it. And I think that this could have been seen as significant for the reasons I'll go into. Because in the Far East, in various countries, in China, in Japan, and Korea, the star Vega is known as the Weaver Princess. Okay, I won't even pronounce the actual names in Chinese or Japanese here. And the story goes, in legend, that the Weaver Princess fell in love with an ox herder, a simple ox herder, who you can see here. And because she fell in love with him, she forgot her duties of weaving. And in one account, what she is weaving is the Milky Way on which the star is placed. Both of these stars are very close to the Milky Way. And she also weaves the stars, the Milky Ways, and the heaven. So in many ways, she is like a creator, a genetrix. She is a creator of the stars. She's a creator of the heavens. Clearly, she's a very early goddess, possibly associated with the Milky Way, like the goddess Nuit in Egypt. But she's associated very strongly with the star Vega. Vega is in the constellation of Lyra, the celestial lyre, the instrument. And I would be very interested to talk to people here that have knowledge of Javanese astronomy to find out what it represents here afterwards. The other important thing is that Vega was the pole star in the northern hemisphere from around 13,000 to 11,000 BC. Today, that our pole star in the northern hemisphere is Polaris. Around the time of the pyramids and the pyramids of ancient Egypt, it was the star Thuban in Draco, the celestial dragon. But around 11,000 to 13,000, it was Vega. And this means that Vega was the turning point of the heavens. And although obviously we're in the southern hemisphere now, the Sunderland landmass extended over the equator into the northern hemisphere. And obviously there were various other islands and land masses which would have been connected with Sunderland anyway. So there is no question that the people living in Java would have been aware of this turning point of the heavens. And all they would have needed to have done is to go 1 degree north of the equator to see all the stars turning about this single star. And I think that this probably brought together the importance of this star as this goddess who's remembered as this person known as the Weaver Princess. Now, the Weaver Princess is also found in Javanese folklore, and I'll be very interested if anybody here has further knowledge of this, where she's known variously under different names. Puasi, the Dui Noang Wulan, you're going to pronounce this different, or Dayang Sumbe. Okay? Please excuse my bad pronunciation. And in Javanese folklore, she is the daughter of a heavenly sow, or pig, which is called a kerang, I understand, and marries a supernatural dog. Now, is it possible that behind these stories is some kind of astronomical knowledge dating from the time when Vega may have been pole star? And is it possible that the Weaver Princess in Java also represents Vega, this bright star that would have been seen so prominently from Gunung Padang towards the Gede Peak at two different times, around 14,500 BC, but also around 8,750 BC. Is there some relationship here? And what is this supernatural dog? Is this perhaps a constellation, or is it something more? Now, please excuse the imagery that I've had to use here. If anybody has a better picture that I can use in my next lecture, then I will happily receive it by email from them. But there is a legend of Sangkuriang. Have I pronounced that right? Do most of you know this story? And this is, I think, a very powerful and very, very important story. Because the Weaver Princess is Dayang Sumba, or her other name is Rarasati. Is this correct? Am I getting this correct? And again, she's the daughter of a sow, a boar, whose name is Wayung Yang. And she is banished and marries a male dog called Tumang, and has a son called Sangkuriang. Okay? And it's a great folk tale. It's still obviously very popular today. But it's a great creation story, and it's explaining the origins of Lake Bandung, and also the various mountains around the Bandung Basin, the names of which I'm giving here. Now, according to some sources, the Bandung Lake disappeared around 13,000 years ago. Now, I was having a conversation with Johan Arif just before coming on stage, and he said there is some dispute about when the lake disappeared, and some sources suggest it could be as recent as just 4,000 years ago. But I think it's very, very crucial that in the future this date is confirmed with some accuracy, because what it suggests is that this legend dates to that period when the lake was present, and that it involves the Weaver Princess. So that suggests that the Weaver Princess could have been an important character in mythology and star lore as early as 13,000 BC on Java. And these are the sort of dates that we're talking about in connection with Gunung Padang. Now, we certainly know that there was a material culture responsible for Gobekli Tepe around 12,000 years ago, but could there have been a material culture in Java that was responsible for Gunung Padang and these legends of the Weaver Princess as early as 13,000 years ago? Well, and also, does it make sense of the links with the Weaver Princess as a symbol of sovereignty and the Star Vega? Because what I've been discovering is that on the island of Sumba, the concept of the Weaver Princess is still present within sovereignty. The princess of a royal house or a royal clan is encouraged to become a master weaver, and that this is an important part of her life, and that when she becomes queen, you know, she still presents this whole personage of becoming the absolute and most important weaver of the entire kingdom. And so that I think there is a relationship between this concept of the Weaver Princess and sovereignty, not only with star law, but also sites itself. And I think this has got some connection with Gunung Padang. But I think that one of the keys is obsidian. Now, the people that constructed Gobekli Tepe, the so-called Swiderians, would seem to have been masters in their trades. They were sophisticated hunters, shamans, traders. They were some of the earliest miners in the world, and they were stone tool specialists. And they prized obsidian. They controlled the trade of obsidian. Wherever you go in the world, follow the obsidian trail, because this will bring you to the power elites that control ancient or prehistoric kingdoms, because it's such a beautiful, prized artifact. This is an obsidian, by the way. This is made of flint. What we know is that there was a major obsidian industry in the Bandung Basin, which was found as early as the 1930s by von Koenigswald. And these obsidian settlement sites were on the slopes surrounding the Bandung Lake. Okay? So in other words, there's every reason to suggest that they were present when the lake was there. Now, we don't know to what state of culture the obsidian industry or the people behind it reached, but I'm certain that they were the people responsible for creating these stories of the Weaver Princess, and I believe very strongly that there's a link between this obsidian industry and the culture behind it and those builders of Gunung Padang, because this obsidian industry is not just Neolithic or Mesolithic, which came prior to that, but almost certainly Paleolithic. The style of these so-called flake tools is very, very old. I mean, the one on the left here, this is made of what's known as pitch stone, which is a very crude form of obsidian, which you can see here. This is a flake. This is a small adze or scraper. This is an extremely ancient but very, very effective form of stone tool technology, which probably began around 200, 300,000 years ago in Africa, and obviously moved into the Eurasian continent, and is present here in Java right the way through until Neolithic times within these settlement sites. But as to who was responsible for this, we're not sure. But I do believe that, as I said, that this culture was responsible for the Sangkuriang Weaver Princess and supernatural dog myth. Now, the obsidian was sourced from two volcanoes in the Bandung Basin. One's called Nagreg, and the other one is Gunung Padang. Okay, you obviously probably know these sites, which are to the east and the southeast of Bandung Basin. But we also know that some of these tools, a settlement site, or certainly tools were found in the is it Bolgar, is that how you pronounce it, city in that area, which is not far from the stratovolcano, the Gede stratovolcano, and thus not that far from Gunung Padang himself. Okay, and So there is a good chance of a connection. And I think that as the work goes deeper at Gunung Padang, we should be looking for evidence of this obsidian at this site itself. Now, I've been told I've only got a few minutes left, but we should be looking for other sites relating to the material culture that will link those between Gunung Padang and, I would say, this obsidian culture of the Bandung Basin. And myself, my colleague Hugh Newman and Danny Hillman are looking into this at the moment. We're looking at another site in the mountains exactly between the two, which we'll be visiting within the next few days. And perhaps we need to talk to people possibly about this. We'd still need a driver. One of the other things that needs investigating is this origins from a supernatural dog, basically. Because we find that this story of descendancy from a supernatural dog, particularly a red dog, was very important amongst the indigenous peoples of Java known as the Kelang. We need to know more about these cultures. They believe they're descended from the weaver princess and a red dog. This red dog is some kind of divine being that can transform between a human and a dog. And I think that this is very, very important that we investigate this. Because these stories of these myths of origin, as they're called, from a red dog, are found not just on Java, but from the northwest corner of China right the way through to the southeast, the coast of Southeast Asia. For instance, even amongst the so-called Uyghur people of the Taklamakan, the Tarim Basin, who are also in the Altai and the Baikal regions of Siberia, there is belief in the descendancy directly from this princess and a red dog, with so much similarities with what's going on at Java that I cannot believe there's not a relationship. So this is something that also needs to be looked at. The other thing that needs to be looked at, again, we're not going to get a chance to go into this, is that a new form of archaic human is discovered only in the past 5 years, called the Denisovans. We had our own ancestors, Homo sapiens, we had Neanderthals, and now we have the Denisovans. And they definitely reached the area of Indonesia through the routes. The evidence of them have been found in the Altai region, up there, a place called the Denisova Cave. And it's been found that up to 5% of the DNA of the people living in the region of northern Australia, in areas like Papua New Guinea, and also in Indonesia itself, have up to 5% Denisovan DNA. That means that the Denisovans almost certainly reached Java. And the importance about this is that in the same layers as the Denisovan fossil remains are being found in the Altai region, extreme high culture is coming up, evidence of extreme high culture, including this incredible bracelet or bangle that dates to 40 to 50,000 years ago. This is extraordinary. It's made from something called chloriterolite, and this is the sort of thing you would expect perhaps 4,000 years ago, but this is so old. And although the archaeologists want to see this as a product of our own ancestors, there's no reason why this could not have been created by Denisovans, or at least Denisovan human hybrids. The important thing about this is that there's evidence that the Denisovans were of extreme height, up to perhaps 7 to 7.5 feet tall. The reasons for this I cannot go into now, but it does seem as if they could have been giants. And what's interesting is that on Java, the Hindu legends talk about the earliest inhabitants being known as the Rakshasa or the Rakasha, who were giants, and that they were the ones that created the Javanese alphabet. And I wonder whether these could be Denisovan human hybrids. And this is the subject that I'll be talking about in my new book, Hybrid Origins, which should be out next year. And what's interesting is that I believe that this origins from the supernatural dog, so I'll come on to that, relate to shamanism, the transformation of the human into a dog or a wolf, but also the relationship of the dog in the sky, because the dog is also seen as a symbol of the Milky Way and of contact with the sky world. And I think that relates to that. And of course, we haven't even got on to Java man and Homo erectus, who we know continued on in Java until at least 27,000 years ago. Is it possible that the creators of Gunung Padang could have been Homo erectus human hybrids? It's all possibility. These are all new areas of research which I hope that you'll join myself and Danny and Johan Arif and all the rest of the people here today in trying to find these answers. So without further ado, I'll say thank you very much. And my website, if anybody wishes to contact me, is andrewcollins.com. Obviously, find me on Facebook, Andrew Collins, author. And this is my book on Gobekli Tepe, Gobekli Tepe, Genesis of the Gods, which presumably you can get through Amazon over here in Java if you're interested. I've done many other books as well. So thank you very much again.